The gymnasium at Cal State Long Beach held 412 people on the evening of March 9, 1974. The overhead lights ran fluorescent and without mercy, casting everything below them in a flat, institutional white. The bleachers were full of practitioners, coaches, black belts, former competitors, men who had spent the better part of their adult lives trying to understand what a human body could do under pressure. They had come for the Invitational, and the Invitational had delivered. 6 hours of clean technical competition. The air carried the smell of canvas and chalk and effort. Nobody had paid any particular attention to the man sitting in the fourth row from the back, section C, 3 seats in from the left aisle. He was wearing a gray denim jacket over a white t-shirt, dark jeans, low canvas shoes, the kind sold from shelves in unremarkable stores, a cap pulled down level with his eyebrows. He was average height, average build, tending slightly toward compact. He had arrived before most of the crowd, taken his seat without greeting anyone nearby, and remained there without movement through the afternoon sessions. He had a paper cup of coffee that had been cold for 2 hours. He had not replaced it. In the third row from the front, separated from that quiet man by the entire room and by what would turn out to be a very great deal more than that, sat Alexander Volkov. Volkov was 24 years old. He stood 6 feet 2 inches. He weighed 211 pounds, distributed across a frame that suggested neither excess nor neglect, only function, precisely calibrated. He had won gold at the 1972 Munich Olympics in the under 93 kilogram division, had done so at the age of 22, and had not lost a sanctioned match in the 31 months since. His coach, a man named Hartmann, who had trained 3 European champions across 2 decades, had said of him in a German sporting journal 9 months prior that Volkov was the finest reading judoka he had coached in terms of balance disruption, that his ability to manufacture kazushi, to break a man's structure before the man understood his structure was at risk, was not a taught skill, but something closer to an instinct. The quote had run in translation in 3 American publications. Volkov had come to Long Beach as a guest instructor. He was scheduled to give a 2-day clinic beginning the following morning. He had arrived a day early, attended the Invitational as a spectator, and by early evening had drifted to the corridor outside the main floor, where several coaches and senior practitioners had gathered to talk. He was relaxed. He had the specific ease of a man who had never found reason to be otherwise in a martial arts setting, because in 31 months no such reason had presented itself. In the next 11 seconds, 3 movements and 1 sentence spoken quietly from a floor he had not planned on being on, that would change. Before the end of that evening, 412 trained observers would know something they had not known at its beginning. And 46 years later, a man named Guerrero, who had been standing against the far wall with a clipboard, would tell his students the same story he had told at least 200 times before, and he would still pause at the same moment, still look down at the floor, and say only, "I don't know that I have ever seen anything so fast in my life." And I have seen fast. Nobody in that gymnasium knew what was coming. The man in the fourth row had made very certain of that. If you want to know what happened in those 11 seconds, and you will want to know, make sure you are subscribed and drop a comment below telling us where in the world you are watching from. This community stretches across 6 continents, and every name in that comment section matters. To understand what happened in that corridor, it is necessary first to understand what Alexander Volkov had built his life around, and why a man who had built his life around it might, on one specific evening in a fluorescent-lit gymnasium in California, allow certainty to become a liability. Volkov had begun judo at age 7 in a provincial training hall in West Germany, where his father coached youth programs on weekday evenings. By 14 he had placed in the national junior rankings. By 16 he was the junior national champion. By 18 he was competing internationally and losing only to men who had 4 and 6 years of senior competition behind them. He did not interpret those losses as failures. He interpreted them as a syllabus. He worked through the syllabus with a thoroughness that his coach Hartmann described, in private, as almost unsettling in its patience. What separated Volkov from other technically accomplished competitors was a specific quality of stillness before a throw. Most judoka at his level signaled intention through pressure, a gathering of force that an experienced opponent could feel through the fabric of a gi, a slight shift in weight distribution. Volkov gave nothing. He had trained himself, over 8 years of daily repetition, to initiate a throw from the same physical signature as no throw at all. By the time the opponent's nervous system registered that something was happening, the mechanical process was already 30 to 40% complete. At that threshold under normal competition conditions, recovery was statistically improbable. He was not a man who had been handed anything. Every title was earned against men who were trying to stop him. And very often they were very good at trying. The gold in Munich had come in a final against a Soviet competitor named Tikhonov, who had won the previous European Championship and who had beaten Volkov in their only prior meeting by a penalty decision. In the rematch, in front of 8,000 people, Volkov had thrown Tikhonov with an Osoto-gari variation at the 3-minute 41-second mark of a 5-minute match that had, until that moment, appeared to favor neither man. The throw was decisive and clean, and the room had gone briefly quiet before the noise arrived. He was 22 years old when he did that. He was 24 now, and in the 31 months between those two moments he had continued to work through the syllabus, and he had not lost. The corridor outside the main gymnasium floor ran approximately 60 feet along the eastern wall of the building. It connected the main hall to the administrative offices and to a secondary warm-up area. At approximately 7:45 in the evening it held perhaps 15 people, coaches in conversation, a few senior students who had finished competing, a journalist from a Southern California martial arts publication who was there to cover the invitational and had stayed longer than he intended. There was a folding table with water and cups, a corkboard with tournament brackets pinned to it. Overhead, the same fluorescent lights. Volkov had arrived in the corridor through the main hall doors. He had been speaking with a tournament official named Delaney and a senior instructor from a San Diego school whose name has not survived with consistency across the various accounts. The conversation was general: training philosophy, competition formats, the American approach to randori versus the European. Volkov was engaged but not animated. He spoke in competent English with a deliberate cadence. At some point in that conversation, which lasted approximately 22 minutes before what followed, the name Chuck Norris came up. The context has been reported differently across different accounts. What is consistent is that Norris's name was present, and that someone, the tournament official Delaney in some accounts, the San Diego instructor in others, offered a characterization of Norris's competition record and ability that Volkov received without immediately commenting. He did comment eventually. What he said has been recorded in 3 different forms across the accounts that exist, but the substance is consistent. He said something to the effect that a karate man's competition experience, however extensive, was a different category from what judo competition demanded at the international level. He said it without hostility. It was not a taunt. It was, in his framing, a technical observation about the difference between striking-based arts and throwing arts, about the distance at which each art operated, about the specific conditioning of reading another man's balance through physical contact. He said, a man who fights at range and a man who fights in contact are measuring different things. They do not measure each other easily. This was said in a corridor. It was said to 2 or 3 men in a specific conversation. It was not, in any reasonable reading of events, an invitation to anything. But Volkov had not looked up when he said it. He had not checked who else might be in the corridor. He had not verified who was listening. And one of the men listening was standing approximately 12 feet away, having come through a side door from the main hall 2 minutes before, still wearing the gray denim jacket, and the cap pulled level with his brows. He had not intended to be in this conversation. He had come through the door because the main hall had grown noisy and he preferred the corridor's relative quiet. He held his paper cup, still cold. He had been standing without calling attention to himself, as was his practice in essentially every room he entered. And he had heard what Volkov said. He did not react. He did not interrupt. He did not move. He waited until there was a pause in the conversation. And then he spoke, quietly and without escalation, the way a man speaks when he is asking something ordinary. He said, "I don't think that's quite right." The room changed in the specific way rooms change when something unexpected has introduced itself. Volkov turned and looked at the man for the first time. He saw the denim jacket, the cap, the canvas shoes, the cold paper cup. He assessed what he saw the way a man trained to assess physical situations assesses them, and what he concluded was reasonable given the available information. A spectator, middle-aged, slightly compact, ordinary in all visible respects. Someone who had perhaps done some karate at a local school and had feelings about the honor of the art, Volkov said, with a courtesy that was genuine if not entirely attentive. "I mean no disrespect. I am speaking technically." The man said, "So am I." Volkov looked at him for a moment. He asked what experience the man had. The man did not answer directly. He said, "There is a way to find out, if you want to find out." There was a silence in the corridor of approximately 4 seconds. Delaney, the tournament official, would later say that in those 4 seconds he had an odd feeling he could not name, a sense that the situation had a shape he could not yet see. He set his cup of water down on the folding table without quite realizing he had done it. Volkov nodded once. He said, "All right." He removed his jacket. He set it over the back of a folding chair. He was wearing a training shirt beneath it. He moved to the center of the corridor where there was a clear space of perhaps 15 by 20 feet, and he took a natural standing posture, feet shoulder width, weight distributed evenly, arms relaxed at his sides. It was the posture of a man who had stood this way 10,000 times. The man in the denim jacket did not remove his jacket. He did not stretch. He did not roll his shoulders or shake out his hands or take any of the preparatory movements that precede engagement in almost every circumstance where engagement is anticipated. He set his cold paper cup on the floor against the wall. He straightened. He moved to perhaps 8 feet from Volkov and stopped. 8 feet. Twice beyond conversational range. The specific distance of a man who has thought about distance. Delaney would say later that in that moment he recognized something, though he could not have said why, not yet. Not until what came next. He said the man's posture in those 3 seconds before anything happened was different from posture he had seen before in the same circumstances. He said it was not alertness exactly, and not relaxation exactly. He said it was more like the posture of a man for whom the question of what was about to happen had already been answered. He has already lost. He just does not know it yet. A fight is not two men moving toward each other. A fight is a negotiation about distance, about who controls the space between two bodies and under what terms. The man who controls distance controls the options. Volkov's art required a specific distance, close enough for contact, close enough to grip and disrupt balance and rotate leverage through a human frame. Everything he had trained for lived inside that distance. Everything he knew how to do began with closing it. If you kept him at 8 feet, he was working against his own nature. If you let him close it on his terms, you were on his canvas, not yours. The man at 8 feet had not moved, he had not retreated, and he had not closed. He had established a distance, and he was maintaining it with a stillness that gave away nothing about when, or how, or whether it would change. Volkov understood distance. He had spent 8 years becoming one of the best practitioners in the world at controlling it in the context of his art. He began to close, not quickly, deliberately, reading as he moved, watching for a tell. He found none. Second one. Volkov crossed from 8 feet to 6. The man in the jacket had not moved his feet. Volkov's hands came up, the standard approach position, a gesture that was both preparation and information gathering. He was looking for response. He was looking for the specific muscular signature that preceded motion in the shoulder, the hip, the knee. He found none. Second two. Volkov moved to close the remaining distance. He committed to a movement that was the first stage of a grip establishment, an entry that in 31 months of competition had never been cleanly denied because it was never fully telegraphed. His right hand reached, his weight shifted fractionally onto his forward foot. What happened in the moment that followed was witnessed by 15 people at close range, most of them trained martial artists, and no two of their accounts of the mechanics agree in exact detail. What they agree on is the result, and the speed. and the fact that it appeared to require essentially no effort from the man who produced it. The man in the jacket moved. Not backward and not sideways. He moved at an angle that was neither retreat nor advance, a lateral slip that placed him outside the line of Volkov's entry by perhaps 2 feet, and simultaneously removed him from the range of anything Volkov's hands could reach. It was not a large movement. It was the smallest movement that would accomplish what it accomplished. The journalist from the Southern California publication, standing against the far wall, would write in his notebook, "He moved like he knew where the other man's hands were going before they went there. He was not where the throw was." Second 3. Volkov adjusted. He turned to track the movement, a natural and appropriate response, and in turning, his balance shifted through a midpoint that was fractionally less stable than either endpoint. The window was perhaps 0.08 of a second. The man in the jacket was already in it. He did not throw Volkov. That description would be technically imprecise, and precision matters here. What he did was apply, with a controlled and specific pressure to a particular point of structure, the consequence of the balance that Volkov had already compromised in turning. He assisted what was already happening. He made the physics inevitable, approximately 1/4 of a second before they would have been inevitable on their own. The difference was that by the time Volkov reached the floor, the man in the jacket was not where Volkov's instincts would have placed him, and Volkov's right arm, which moved as trained to brace against the fall, found a hand already guiding it into a safe position rather than an empty space. Volkov went down with a controlled and clean sound, not a crash, a conclusion. He was on his back. The overhead fluorescents were directly above him. The corridor was completely without sound for a period that Delaney would describe, in a dozen subsequent retellings, as 3 of the longest seconds of my professional life. The man in the jacket stood where he had been when the movement completed, which was approximately 2 feet to Volkov's left and slightly behind him. His jacket was undisturbed. His cap was undisturbed. His breathing, as far as anyone could discern, was also undisturbed. He crouched. He extended his right hand toward Volkov, not as a formality, as an offer. Volkov looked up at the hand. He looked at the face above it. And it was the first time he had fully looked at the face, because before this moment there had been no reason to look carefully. He looked for approximately 2 seconds. And then something moved across his expression that the journalist, who was watching, would spend 3 sentences trying to describe in his notebook before crossing them all out in writing. He knew. That is the only way to put it. He knew. The man in the denim jacket was 33 years old. He was a 6-time world professional middleweight karate champion. He had won his first title in 1968. And had not lost it in the intervening years. He had studied Tang Soo Do, Taekwondo, and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He had sparred with competitors from virtually every martial art practiced in the continental United States. His name was Carlos Ray Norris, and the only people in the world who called him that were his mother and the officials at the licensing offices where he had registered his dojos. Everyone else called him Chuck. Volkov took the hand. He was assisted to his feet in the same unhurried way that the movement that put him on the floor had been completed. Without drama, without performance. He stood. He was steady. He looked at the man in front of him for a moment. Then Alexander Volkov, Olympic gold medalist, undefeated for 31 months, did something that 3 people in the corridor would reference for the rest of their lives when asked what they had witnessed that evening. He bowed. A full, clean traditional bow. Not a nod. Not an acknowledgement. A bow. He said something. He said it quietly, and in English, and he said it in the direction of the man in the jacket rather than to the room. The man in the jacket heard it. Perhaps 2 of the 15 people present heard it. The others have spent decades guessing at what it was. What is recorded consistently across the accounts that contain it is not the exact words but their character, that they were an acknowledgement of something Volkov had not previously believed possible, and that they contain no excuse and no qualification. Delaney, who was close enough to have heard, has never repeated what was said. He has only said when asked that it was the right thing to say, and that he has respected it by keeping it. Volkov stood at that moment at a decision that every man reaches eventually, in one form or another, in one room or another. The decision about what to do with a truth you did not anticipate. Some men qualify it, some men find the condition in which it was produced and argue the condition was irregular. Some men go quiet, and let the distance grow between themselves and the moment until the moment no longer seems to bind them. Volkov did none of these things. He picked up his jacket from the chair. He looked at the man in the denim jacket for a moment longer. He said, clearly enough for the room to hear, "I would like to talk, if you are willing." Chuck Norris said, "I have time." They spoke for 40 minutes in the corridor, seated on folding chairs with the brackets still pinned to the corkboard behind them. The journalist had the sense to close his notebook, and did not open it again until both men had left. What spread through the martial arts community in Southern California in the weeks that followed, did not spread through journalism. There was no report in the Southern California publication whose journalist had been present. He had closed his notebook, and he kept it closed, out of a professional respect he would later say he had never regretted. What spread moved the way legitimate things move in closed communities, through the dojos, through the tournaments, through the conversations between coaches who trusted each other. By April of 1974 the account had reached San Francisco and Phoenix and Seattle. By summer it was in Chicago. By the time it crossed to the East Coast it had accumulated the distortions that all oral history accumulates. Crowd sizes doubled, the duration of the technique stretched to improbability. The setting migrated in some versions to a public dojo challenge, in others to a film set, in others to an outdoor training session. The bones remained. Roberto Guerrero had been the man with the clipboard against the far wall. He was 26 years old in March of 1974, and had been competing in judo for 8 years. He watched what happened from a distance of approximately 18 feet. He would go on to coach for 37 years, would produce 2 national champions and 1 Olympic alternate, and would retire in 2011 to a teaching position at a small university in Arizona. In his last semester before retirement he gave a lecture to his advanced class that his students have described in similar terms. He told the story of the corridor in Long Beach. He told it the way he had always told it, factually, without decoration, without the mutations it had collected in 37 years of travel. He told them what he had seen from 18 feet. He told them the speed and the economy and the specific quality of stillness before motion. Then he said something that became, for those students, the thing they remembered longest from that course. He said, "There is a kind of competence that makes noise when it enters a room, and a kind that makes silence. We spend our whole lives learning to make noise. We spend very little time learning to sit in the 4th row." He retired 6 weeks later. The students kept the sentence. Volkov returned to Europe after his clinic concluded. His judo career continued for 3 more years before a knee injury at a European championship in 1977 ended his competitive run at the age of 27. He moved into coaching shortly after. He produced 2 Olympic competitors of his own over the following decade. He has been asked about the evening in Long Beach by martial arts researchers and journalists on several occasions across the years. His answers have been consistent, and they have always declined to be specific about what was said privately, and they have always contained the same final point. He has said, in different words across different interviews, that the evening had changed the way he thought about assessment, about the distance between what you can see and what you are not seeing, and about what it costs a man to confuse the two. Norris has spoken about the evening only indirectly. In a written account he provided for a martial arts publication in the late 1980s. He described the importance of tournaments and training halls as places where measurement happens honestly, and where a man can learn more about himself in 4 seconds than in 4 months of training alone. He did not name Volkov. He did not name Long Beach. Those who had been in the corridor recognized what he was describing, and those who had not been there have spent decades locating it. What the man in the 4th row understood that evening and had understood in one form or another, since the years he spent building his foundation one training session at a time, was something that cannot be certified or displayed in advance. It lives in the gap between what a thing looks like and what it is. The story of that corridor is not a story about a champion being defeated. Volkov was not defeated. He made an error in assessment and he acknowledged it without hesitation, and that acknowledgement is as much a part of the story as anything that came before it. The story is about what happens when you measure something too quickly, with instruments that are calibrated only for what you have already seen. A cap pulled low and a cold cup of coffee are not a martial artist. Until they are. The distance between certainty and knowledge is exactly wide enough for 11 seconds and 3 movements. Next week we will go behind the closed doors of a film set in 1985, where a decorated Army Ranger made a wager in front of 40 witnesses that he would not have made if he had looked more carefully at the man across the table. Stay with us.